The washing machine door slammed shut with a bang that echoed through the luxury penthouse kitchen. Sarah Williams stood frozen, her pregnant belly pressed against the cold marble countertop, staring at the designer clothes tumbling inside the drum. The expensive heels clicking on marble floors belonged to her millionaire ex-husband. Though they weren't divorced yet, that reality felt more distant with each passing day. "These are Jessica's workout clothes," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. The words tasted bitter in her mouth as she watched the bright pink sports bra spin in circles through the glass door. "And," Robert replied, not looking up from his tablet. His voice carried that dismissive tone she'd grown to recognize over their 20-year marriage. "You're not working right now. Make yourself useful." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her 7-month pregnant belly. The baby kicked as if sensing her distress. "Robert, I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." "Jessica's carrying my child too. Her clothes are designer. Treat them carefully." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She gripped the marble countertop until her knuckles turned white. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched out below them, but she felt trapped in this golden cage 40 stories above the ground. "What did you just say?" Sarah turned to face her husband of 20 years. Robert Williams, tech CEO and narcissistic master manipulator, finally looked up from his screen. "You heard me correctly. Sarah, Jessica is pregnant, due in 4 months. I thought you should know since you'll be helping with preparations." Sarah's legs felt weak. She lowered herself onto one of the kitchen stools, her pregnant body suddenly feeling heavier than ever. "How long has this been going on? Does it matter? What matters is that you understand your position in this household. Jessica needs support during her pregnancy, and since you're not contributing financially anymore, this is how you contribute." The washing machine hummed its mechanical rhythm, a soundtrack to Sarah's crumbling world. She stared at her husband, this man she'd built a life with, and realized she was looking at a stranger. "Robert, we've been married for 20 years. We're having a baby together. How can you ask me to take care of your mistress?" He set down his tablet with deliberate precision. "Because, Sarah, you seem to have forgotten that this penthouse, your credit cards, your comfortable life, all of it belongs to me. If you want to keep living here, you'll do what's needed." Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not anymore. "And if I refuse," Robert's smile was cold, calculated, "then you'll find yourself living somewhere much less comfortable, without any financial support. And we both know you haven't worked in years. Who's going to hire a 50-something woman with no recent experience?" The cruelty in his voice made Sarah's stomach turn. This was narcissistic abuse in its purest form, and she was finally beginning to recognize it for what it was. "I need some air," Sarah said, standing up carefully. "Don't forget to move the clothes to the dryer when the cycle finishes. Jessica has a yoga class at 3. Sarah walked toward the bedroom, each step feeling like she was moving through quicksand. Behind her, she could hear Robert returning to his tablet, already dismissing her existence. In their bedroom, she sat on the edge of the bed they'd shared for 2 decades and finally let the tears fall. Her phone buzzed with a text message. The name on the screen made her heart skip. "Mom. How are you feeling today, sweetheart? The baby must be getting big now." Sarah stared at the message from her mother, Diana Mitchell. How could she explain that her millionaire ex-husband was forcing her to do laundry for his pregnant mistress? How could she admit that her 20-year marriage had become a prison? Instead, she typed back, "Feeling tired but okay. Baby is active today." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Sarah had become an expert at hiding the truth, even from herself. The washing machine buzzed from the kitchen, signaling the end of its cycle. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had to move Jessica's clothes to the dryer. She had to continue this nightmare until she could figure out how to escape it. As she walked back to the kitchen, Sarah caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. When had she started looking so small? When had her shoulders begun to curve inward, like she was trying to make herself invisible? She opened the washing machine and began transferring the wet clothes to the dryer. A sports bra, yoga pants, designer t-shirts, all expensive, all belonging to the woman who was carrying her husband's child. As she shook out a pair of yoga pants, something crinkled in the pocket. Sarah's fingers found a small piece of paper. She pulled it out and unfolded it, her hands trembling. It was a pregnancy test. positive. But what made Sarah's blood run cold wasn't the result. It was the date written on the back in Jessica's handwriting. This test was dated 2 weeks before Sarah had announced her own pregnancy to Robert, which meant Jessica had been pregnant first, which meant Robert had been planning this betrayal for months. Sarah sank onto the kitchen floor. The pregnancy test clutched in her shaking hand. The sound of her own heartbeat filled her ears as the reality crashed over her. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about replacement. Robert appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Sarah, what are you doing on the floor?" She looked up at him, this man who had systematically destroyed her confidence and independence over 20 years of marriage. "How long have you been planning to replace me?" Robert's expression didn't change. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Are you feeling all right? Pregnancy can cause emotional instability." But Sarah had seen the flicker of something in his eyes. Recognition, calculation, fear. She pulled herself to her feet, her pregnant body protesting. "I found Jessica's pregnancy test. Robert, the date is very interesting." For the first time in months, Sarah saw her husband look genuinely concerned. Not about her welfare, but about his careful plans being discovered. "Sarah, you're clearly upset. Why don't you lie down? I'll call Dr. Martinez to check on you and the baby. Don't you dare use my pregnancy to manipulate me anymore." Sarah's voice was stronger than it had been in months. "I know what you're doing. Robert, the question is, what are you going to do now that I know?" Robert stepped closer, and Sarah instinctively backed against the kitchen island. "What I'm going to do, Sarah, is remind you that you have nowhere else to go. No money, no job, no friends who haven't gotten tired of your complaining. You need me. Maybe I don't need you as much as you think I do." The words surprised Sarah as much as they surprised Robert. Where had that strength come from? She felt the baby kick again, and suddenly she understood. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was protecting her child from growing up in a house where love was a weapon and kindness was a weakness. "We'll see about that," Robert said quietly. There was something dangerous in his tone that made Sarah's skin crawl. As Robert walked away, Sarah remained in the kitchen, Jessica's pregnancy test still in her hand. The dryer hummed behind her, and she realized with bitter irony that she was still doing the other woman's laundry. But something had shifted. Something fundamental had broken open inside her. And for the first time in years, Sarah Williams felt like she might remember who she used to be. She picked up her phone and scrolled to her mother's contact. Her finger hovered over the call button for a long moment before she finally pressed it. Across town, the phone rang in a converted warehouse studio where Diana Mitchell was draping fabric on a dress form. At 62, Diana had built a successful fashion design business from nothing, and her sharp instincts had served her well in both business and life. When she heard her daughter's ringtone, she immediately set down her fabric scissors. "Sarah, darling, how are you feeling today?" Diana's voice carried the warmth that only came from years of loving someone unconditionally. "Hi, Mom. I'm okay. Just tired from the pregnancy." Sarah's voice sounded hollow through the phone, lacking the excitement that should come with discussing a long-awaited grandchild. Diana frowned, her maternal instincts immediately on alert. "You don't sound okay, sweetheart. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Robert's been very attentive. He's just busy with work." There it was again, that careful, measured tone that Diana had been hearing more frequently over the past year. It was the voice of someone choosing their words very carefully. Someone who had learned that the wrong phrase could have consequences. "Sarah, talk to me. Really talk to me. What's going on in that house?" Diana heard a long pause, followed by what sounded like her daughter moving to another room. Background noise suggested Sarah was walking through the penthouse. "Mom, can I ask you something? When you were building your business, did you ever feel like you were losing yourself?" Diana's heart clenched. This wasn't about business, and they both knew it. "Are you asking me about work, or are you asking me about your marriage?" Another pause. Diana could hear traffic sounds through Sarah's phone now, suggesting she'd move to a window or balcony. "What would you do if someone you loved made you feel like you were disappearing?" Diana set down her work entirely and moved to her office chair. This conversation required her full attention. "Sarah, honey, love doesn't make people disappear. Love makes people grow. What's Robert doing to you?" "He's not doing anything to me. Mom, I'm just being emotional." Pregnancy hormones. You know, Diana had heard enough. 40 years of reading people's emotions through their voices, of understanding the difference between truth and performance, told her everything she needed to know. Sarah Elizabeth Williams, I have known you for 38 years. You are not an emotional person. You are not prone to drama. And you are not someone who calls your mother looking for validation about pregnancy hormones. Something is wrong, and I need you to tell me what it is. The silence stretched so long that Diana wondered if the call had dropped. Then she heard a sound that broke her heart, her strong, capable daughter crying quietly. Sarah, baby, talk to me. He has a mistress. Mom, she's pregnant too. He made me wash her clothes today. Diana's hand tightened on the phone. He made you what? Her gym clothes. He said since I'm not working, I should make myself useful by taking care of things for Jessica. That's her name. Jessica. Diana stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Sarah, where are you right now? Are you safe? I'm on the balcony. He's in his office on a conference call. Mom, I found her pregnancy test. She was pregnant before I was. I think he's been planning to replace me. Diana was already reaching for her car keys. Listen to me very carefully. Sweetheart, I'm coming to see you. Today. Right now. Mom, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Sarah, what you're describing isn't just infidelity. This is something much more serious. This is systematic emotional abuse, and I will not let you go through this alone. Diana could hear her daughter's breathing through the phone, shaky and uncertain. But what if he's right? What if I can't make it on my own? I haven't worked in 15 years. Mom, who's going to hire a 50-something woman with no recent experience? What if I can't support myself and the baby? Sarah, listen to me. You are Diana Mitchell's daughter. You are smart, capable, and stronger than you remember. And even if you weren't, even if you needed help for the rest of your life, you would never deserve to be treated like a servant in your own home. Diana was already walking toward her car, phone pressed to her ear. Your father and I raised you to know your worth. Robert has spent years making you forget it, but I'm going to help you remember. Do you understand me? I think so. No, sweetheart. I need you to know so. Can you do something for me? What would go look in the mirror right now? Really look. And remember that the woman looking back at you survived 20 years with a man who tried to make her small. That woman is a fighter, even if she's forgotten how to fight. Diana heard footsteps through the phone, then a long pause. I'm looking. What do you see? Another pause. I see someone who looks tired. Look deeper. What else? I see someone who's still here, someone who's still standing. That's right, you're still standing. Sarah, and as long as you're standing, we can figure out the rest. I'm driving to the airport right now. I'll be there tonight. Robert won't like you staying here. Diana's laugh was sharp and confident. Sweetheart, I've been running my own business for 25 years. I've dealt with suppliers who tried to cheat me, competitors who tried to steal from me, and clients who thought they could intimidate me because I'm a woman. Robert Williams doesn't scare me. But Mom, no buts. I'm coming, and we're going to figure this out together. In the meantime, I want you to do something important. What? Start remembering who you were before Robert convinced you that you were nobody. Remember the woman who graduated summa cum laude from college. Remember the woman who ran her own consulting business before she got married. Remember the woman who chose to focus on family, not because she was weak, but because she was generous. Diana could hear her daughter's breathing steadying through the phone. That woman is still inside you. Sarah, she's just been hibernating. It's time to wake her up. I'm scared, Mom. Being scared means you're finally seeing the situation clearly. Fear can be a gift if you use it to fuel action instead of paralysis. Are you ready to stop being scared and start being angry? I think so. Good. Anger is much more useful than fear. Anger gets things done. Diana was already pulling into the airport parking garage. I'm about to book a flight. I'll text you my arrival time. And Sarah. Yes, or document everything. Write down what happened today with the laundry. Write down exactly what Robert said to you. We're going to need evidence. Evidence for what? For when we destroy him? The line was quiet for a moment. Then Sarah spoke. and Diana heard something in her daughter's voice that had been missing for years: determination. "Okay, Mom, I'll write it down. That's my girl. I'll see you tonight. And Sarah, you're going to be okay. We're going to make sure of it." After Diana hung up, she sat in her car for a moment, processing what she'd heard. Her successful, intelligent daughter was being systematically broken down by a narcissistic abuser who thought he could replace her like an outdated appliance. Diana Mitchell had built a fashion empire by understanding that sometimes you had to tear apart a design completely before you could create something beautiful. It appeared that philosophy was about to apply to more than just clothing. She pulled out her phone and started making calls. First, a flight to Sarah's city, then a call to her lawyer. If Robert Williams thought he could destroy Diana Mitchell's daughter without consequences, he was about to learn exactly how wrong he could be. By the time Diana's plane took off 3 hours later, she had already begun assembling the resources they would need. She had 40 years of business experience, a network of powerful contacts, and a mother's fury driving her forward. Robert Williams had made a critical error in judgment. He had underestimated the power of women supporting women, and he was about to pay dearly for that mistake. Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Sarah moved through the afternoon like a woman waking up from a long nightmare. Her mother's words echoed in her mind as she went about the tasks Robert expected her to complete. But now, instead of moving through the motions mindlessly, Sarah was paying attention. She was documenting. The kitchen sounds felt different now, the dishes clinking as she loaded the dishwasher, the coffee brewing for Robert's afternoon meeting. Everything carried the weight of evidence, of a story being recorded for the first time in years. From the living room, she could hear muffled male voices discussing merger deals and quarterly profits. Robert was entertaining potential investors, men who saw him as a successful tech CEO rather than the man who made his pregnant wife wash his mistress's clothes. Sarah pulled out her phone and opened a new note. Her fingers moved carefully across the screen. Tuesday, 2:15 p.m. Robert forced me to wash Jessica's gym clothes. When I protested, he reminded me that I have no financial independence and threatened to remove my support if I refused. He confirmed that Jessica is pregnant and that I would be expected to help with preparations for her pregnancy. The act of writing it down made it real in a way that simply experiencing it hadn't. Sarah could see the pattern now, the calculated cruelty of each interaction. Her phone rang, interrupting her documentation. The caller ID showed Robert's personal number, but he was clearly still in his meeting. Sarah answered without thinking. "Hello. Robert, baby. I'm getting tired of this arrangement." The voice was sultry, demanding, with an edge of entitlement that made Sarah's skin crawl. "The baby's due in 4 months, and I want to start making real plans." Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. This had to be Jessica. "I want the penthouse, Robert. I want the life you promised me. I'm tired of hiding in some apartment while your wife plays house in my future home." Sarah found her voice. "Who is this?" There was a pause, then a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, you must be the current wife. Well, this is awkward." "The current wife?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Don't worry, honey. That's temporary. Robert and I have been planning this transition for months. I'm Jessica. By the way, I suppose you've been washing my clothes." The casual cruelty in Jessica's tone was breathtaking. Sarah felt something shift inside her, a door slamming shut on her old self and another one opening. "Actually, Jessica, I think you should know something about the man you're planning a future with." "Oh, this should be interesting. What could you possibly tell me that I don't already know?" Sarah's voice grew stronger. "He told me the exact same things he's telling you. Promised me the same life. And in a few years, when you've given up your independence and had his child, there will be another woman washing your clothes while he makes the same promises to her." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Sarah wondered if Jessica had hung up. "That's not true," Jessica finally said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "Robert loves me. He chose me. Robert doesn't love anyone but himself, and he doesn't choose women. Jessica, he collects them until they're no longer useful. You're just bitter because you're being replaced." Sarah looked around the penthouse that had been her home for 20 years, at the life she'd built that was being systematically dismantled. "Maybe I am bitter, but I'm also right, and deep down, you know it." This time Jessica did hang up. Sarah stood in the kitchen, holding the phone, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years power. She had spoken truth to both her abuser and his accomplice, and the world hadn't ended. She added Jessica's call to her documentation, noting the time and the exact words exchanged. Then she did something that surprised her. She smiled. From the living room, she heard Robert's voice rising in animated discussion about market opportunities and growth projections. The men in that room saw him as a successful businessman, but Sarah was beginning to see him as what he really was, a predator who had gotten careless. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Flight lands at 8:47 p.m. Don't pick me up. I'll take a taxi. Love you. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. Help was coming. For the first time in years, she wouldn't have to face Robert's manipulation alone. She decided to make one more phone call to someone she hadn't spoken to in months. Sarah scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for: Lisa Chen, her best friend from college who had tried to stay in touch despite Robert's increasing interference. Sarah, oh my God, how are you? How's the pregnancy? Lisa's voice was warm and surprised. Lisa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. What's wrong? You sound different. When was the last time we had a real conversation, I mean? When was the last time I called you just to talk? Not because I needed something or because there was some crisis. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Sarah, honey, it's been over a year. Every time I've tried to reach out, Robert said you were too tired or too busy or that you'd call me back. You never called back. Sarah felt her stomach drop. I never got those messages. What do you mean you never got them? I left messages with Robert at least 10 times. Lisa, I think Robert has been isolating me from my friends. I think he's been intercepting my calls and messages. Sarah, that's really serious. That's not normal behavior. I'm beginning to understand that nothing about my marriage has been normal. They talked for 20 minutes, and with each revelation about blocked messages and intercepted calls, Sarah's understanding of her situation became clearer. Robert hadn't just been unfaithful, he had been systematically cutting her off from everyone who might support her or help her see the truth about her situation. Sarah, Lisa said as their conversation was winding down, I want you to know that if you need anything at all, I'm here. I've been worried about you for a long time. Thank you. That means more than you know. After hanging up, Sarah added Lisa's revelations to her growing documentation. The pattern was becoming undeniable: financial control, social isolation, emotional manipulation, and now the introduction of a replacement. She heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly put her phone away. Robert appeared in the kitchen, looking pleased with himself. The meeting went well. We should be closing the merger by the end of the month. He looked around the kitchen approvingly. I see you've been productive this afternoon. Yes, very productive, Sarah agreed, thinking of her phone calls and documentation rather than the household tasks he assumed she'd been focused on. Good. Jessica will be coming for dinner Thursday night. I want you to prepare something nice. She's been having cravings for Italian food. Sarah looked at her husband, this man who thought he could orchestrate her humiliation and expect her cooperation. Of course, Robert. I'll make sure everything is perfect. Excellent. I knew you'd understand the situation. Sarah. Robert had no idea how well Sarah was beginning to understand the situation, but he would find out soon enough. As he walked away, Sarah returned to her phone and added one more entry to her notes. Robert announced that Jessica will be joining us for dinner Thursday. He expects me to cook for the woman carrying his child. Then she scrolled to her mother's contact and sent a text. Mom, can you make sure your flight gets here before Thursday? We need to talk strategy. The response came back immediately. Already rebooked on an earlier flight, landing at 6:30 p.m. today. Time to show your husband what happens when he messes with a Mitchell woman. Sarah looked out at the city spread below her and felt something she hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. Not for what Robert might do to her, but for what she and her mother might do to him. The tables were about to turn, and Robert Williams had no idea what was coming. By evening, Sarah had filled 3 pages of notes on her phone, documenting years of patterns she'd never recognized as systematic abuse. When Robert announced they'd be hosting his business associates for an impromptu dinner meeting, Sarah saw an opportunity that she wasn't prepared to waste. The formal dining room hummed with conversation as 6 men in expensive suits discussed quarterly projections over wine that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier as Robert played the role of successful host, charming and confident. Sarah had spent 2 hours preparing the meal, just as she'd done countless times before. But tonight, instead of retreating to the kitchen to eat alone, she had other plans. "Robert, we need to discuss Jessica immediately," Sarah announced, walking into the dining room with her chin raised and her shoulders straight. The conversation stopped abruptly. 6 male faces turned toward her, expressions ranging from surprise to discomfort. Robert's wine glass paused halfway to his lips. "Sarah, you're embarrassing yourself," Robert said smoothly, his voice carrying just the right note of patient concern. "Gentlemen, please excuse my wife. Pregnancy hormones. You understand?" But Sarah had spent the afternoon remembering who she used to be, and that woman wouldn't be dismissed so easily. "I understand perfectly, Robert. I understand that you've been lying to everyone in this room." Sarah's voice was steady, clear, and loud enough for everyone to hear. "I understand that while you've been presenting yourself as a family man, you've been conducting an affair with a woman named Jessica." The silence in the room was deafening. Robert's associates exchanged uncomfortable glances, their wine glasses forgotten. "Sarah, you're clearly having some kind of episode. The only episode I'm having is a moment of clarity." Sarah turned to address the men at the table directly. "Gentlemen, I thought you should know that the man you're considering as a business partner makes his pregnant wife wash his mistress's clothes." One of the men Sarah recognized him as the head of the investment firm set down his glass with a sharp clink. "Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting." "There's no need to reschedule anything," Robert said, standing up and moving towards Sarah. "My wife is going through a difficult time with the pregnancy. Sometimes expectant mothers experience emotional instability." But Sarah wasn't backing down. "Is emotional instability what you call discovering that your husband's mistress is also pregnant? Is that what you call finding out that your husband has been planning to replace you?" The men were already standing, gathering their papers and briefcases. The comfortable business atmosphere had evaporated completely. "Robert, we'll be in touch," one of them said, but his tone suggested they wouldn't be in touch at all. "This is unfortunate timing," another added. "We'll need to discuss this development with our board." Within minutes, Sarah found herself alone in the dining room with Robert. The confrontation she'd planned had succeeded in disrupting his business meeting, but she could see from his expression that she'd made a critical error in strategy. "That was a very expensive mistake." "Sarah," Robert said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous underneath it that made Sarah's skin crawl. "They deserved to know the truth about who they were doing business with." "The truth," Robert laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "The truth is that you just cost me a $20 million merger. The truth is that you've proven exactly what I've been telling people about your mental state." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What have you been telling people about my mental state? That you've been struggling with depression and anxiety during the pregnancy? That you've been having paranoid episodes and making wild accusations? That I've been trying to get you help, but you refuse treatment?" The words hit Sarah like physical blows. "You've been telling people I'm mentally ill. I've been preparing them for when you inevitably have a complete breakdown, which, judging by tonight's performance, appears to be happening right on schedule." Sarah backed toward the door, but Robert stepped between her and the exit. "You want to know what I told my associates about your little outburst just now. I told them that you've been having episodes of paranoid delusion and that you've been making false accusations against me because you're struggling to accept the reality of our situation." "What situation?" "That our marriage is over, Sarah. That I'm moving on with someone younger and more stable. That you're about to become a single mother with no income, no support system, and a documented history of mental instability." Sarah's hands shook as she realized the scope of Robert's manipulation. "You've been planning this for months, haven't you? Not just the affair, but my complete destruction?" "I've been planning for contingencies. You're having my child, which means you'll always be connected to me in some way. I needed to ensure that connection would be manageable. Manageable. That if you ever tried to cause problems for me, no one would believe you. Who's going to take the word of an unstable woman with no independent means against a successful businessman with documented concerns about her mental health?" Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment of self-doubt had been orchestrated. Robert hadn't just been betraying her, he'd been systematically destroying her credibility and independence. "You're never going to let me go." "Are you?" she whispered. "I'm going to let you go when it's convenient for me to let you go. And when I do, you'll be grateful for whatever arrangement I offer you, because you'll have no other options." Sarah heard footsteps in the hallway and realized Robert's associates might still be in the penthouse. Without thinking clearly, she pushed past Robert and ran toward the front door, hoping to catch them before they left. "Wait!" she called out as the elevator doors were closing. "Please, I need to explain." But the men avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable and eager to escape the domestic drama they'd witnessed. As the elevator doors closed, Sarah heard Robert behind her. "You see, gentlemen?" He called out loud enough for the men to hear through the closing doors. "This is exactly the kind of erratic behavior I've been concerned about." Sarah turned to find Robert standing in the hallway, and she realized he'd orchestrated this perfectly. Her desperate attempt to reach his associates had only reinforced his narrative about her mental instability. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. "Since the day I realized you were more liability than asset," Robert replied. "The affair with Jessica was just one component. I needed you to become so dependent on me that leaving would be impossible, and so isolated that no one would believe you if you tried to expose me." Sarah felt something break inside her, but it wasn't her spirit. It was her last illusion about the man she'd married. "You underestimated one thing, Robert." "What's that?" "You forgot that my mother raised me to be stronger than you'll ever be." Robert's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "Your mother is a 62-year-old fashion designer. Sarah, what exactly do you think she's going to do?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time all evening, she felt genuinely confident. "I guess we'll find out. She lands in an hour." This time, it was Robert's turn to look unsure. 3 hours later, a taxi pulled up outside the luxury apartment building where Sarah had lived for the past 15 years. Diana Mitchell stepped onto the sidewalk, her silver hair gleaming under the streetlights and her expression carrying the focused intensity of a woman on a mission. The doorman recognized her from previous visits, though those had become increasingly rare over the past few years. "Mrs. Mitchell, good evening. Shall I announce you to Mrs. Williams?" "Thank you, James, but I'll surprise her." Diana's heels clicked across the marble lobby with the confidence of someone who had spent decades walking into boardrooms and taking control of situations. The elevator ride to the 40th floor gave her time to center herself and plan her approach. When the elevator doors opened, Diana could hear raised voices coming from inside the penthouse. She rang the doorbell once, then used the spare key Sarah had given her years ago. "Sarah," Diana called out as she entered. "Mom." Sarah's voice came from the direction of the bedroom, and Diana could hear the relief in it. Diana found her daughter sitting on the edge of the bed, her face flushed and her hands shaking. Robert was standing near the window, his posture aggressive and his expression dark. "Diana," Robert said, his voice instantly shifting to the charming tone he'd perfected over 20 years. "What a surprise. Sarah didn't mention you were visiting." "I didn't mention it because I didn't want to give you time to prepare your performance," Diana replied smoothly. She moved directly to Sarah and sat beside her on the bed. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" "She's fine," Robert answered before Sarah could speak. "Just having a difficult evening." "The pregnancy has been emotionally challenging for her." Diana kept her eyes on her daughter. "Sarah, I asked you if you were all right. I'd like to hear your answer." Sarah looked between her mother and her husband, and Diana could see the fear in her daughter's eyes. Not fear of physical violence, but fear of consequences that had been carefully constructed over years of psychological manipulation. "I'm okay, Mom. Robert and I were just discussing some changes that need to happen." "What kind of changes?" Diana's voice remained calm, but her eyes never left Robert's face. "Well," Robert said, settling into an armchair as if they were having a casual conversation, "Sarah's been having some difficulties managing her responsibilities lately. I think she needs more support." Diana raised an eyebrow. "What kind of support?" "Professional support, medical support. Her behavior tonight was quite concerning." "Describe her behavior." She interrupted an important business dinner with wild accusations and paranoid delusions. She embarrassed herself and cost me a significant deal. I'm worried that the pregnancy might be affecting her mental stability. Diana nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his words. Then she turned to Sarah. Sweetheart, tell me about these wild accusations. Sarah glanced nervously at Robert, then back at her mother. I told his business associates about Jessica. And who is Jessica? Robert's pregnant mistress. Diana turned back to Robert, her expression unchanged. So when you say Sarah made wild accusations, you mean she told the truth about your affair. Diana, you don't understand the complexity of the situation? Oh, I understand it perfectly. You're having an affair with another woman. That woman is pregnant. You've been making Sarah serve as unpaid help for your mistress. And when Sarah finally found the courage to speak the truth, you've decided she's mentally unstable. Robert's composure slipped slightly. Sarah has been struggling with depression and paranoia for months. This isn't about the affair. Actually, Robert, this is entirely about the affair and about the systematic way you've been destroying my daughter's confidence and independence. Diana stood up, and even at 62, she carried herself with the authority of someone who had built an empire from nothing. How long have you been telling people that Sarah has mental health problems? I've been concerned about her welfare? That's not what I asked. How long have you been planting the seeds for this narrative about her mental instability? Robert was quiet for a moment, too long, and Diana smiled grimly. Ah, so this has been planned. You've been preparing people to believe that your wife is unstable, so that when you decide to discard her, no one will question your version of events. Diana, I think you're overreacting. Am I? Let's see. You've isolated Sarah from her friends. You've made her financially dependent on you. You've systematically undermined her confidence. You've introduced a replacement and forced Sarah to serve her. And now you're claiming that Sarah's objection to this treatment is evidence of mental illness. Diana moved closer to Robert, and he actually took a step backward. Robert, I've been in business for 25 years. I've seen every type of manipulation, intimidation, and psychological warfare that exists. What you've done to my daughter is textbook narcissistic abuse, and I will not allow it to continue. You will not allow it. Robert's voice carried a dangerous edge. Diana, this is my home, my marriage, and my business. You have no authority here. You're absolutely right. I have no authority in your marriage. Diana's smile was cold and sharp. But I do have authority in my daughter's life, and I do have resources that you've clearly underestimated. What kind of resources? The kind that comes from 25 years of building relationships with powerful people, lawyers, investigators, journalists, business leaders, people who don't like to see women being systematically destroyed by predators. Robert laughed, but it sounded forced. You're going to intimidate me with your fashion industry contacts. I'm not going to intimidate you at all. Robert, I'm going to destroy you using the same methods you've been using on Sarah systematically, carefully, and completely. The room fell silent except for the sound of traffic 40 stories below. Sarah looked between her mother and her husband, seeing Robert's confidence waver for the first time in years. Diana, I think you're misunderstanding the situation, Robert said, his voice returning to its practiced charm. Sarah and I are working through some marital difficulties. These things happen, but we're committed to our family and our future together. Are you committed to your future with Jessica too? Because from what I understand, you've made similar promises to both women. Robert's jaw tightened. I don't know what Sarah has told you. Sarah has told me the truth, and unlike you, I believe her. I've believed her from the moment she called me this afternoon, because I know my daughter. She doesn't lie, she doesn't exaggerate, and she doesn't have paranoid delusions. Diana moved back to the bed and took Sarah's hand. What she has is a mother who spent 40 years learning how to fight bullies. And Robert, you've just become my primary target. Robert looked between the two women, and Diana could see him calculating, trying to determine how serious a threat she represented. Sarah, he said finally, I think your mother should probably stay in a hotel tonight. She seems upset, and I don't want her stress affecting your pregnancy. Actually, Diana said, I'll be staying right here. In fact, I'll be staying until we've resolved this situation completely. And how do you propose we resolve it? Diana's smile was sharp and confident. We're going to give you the same choice you've been giving Sarah. Robert, you can do this the easy way, or you can do this the hard way. But one way or another, you're going to stop abusing my daughter. For the first time since Diana had arrived, Robert looked genuinely angry. You have no idea what you're getting involved in. Actually, I have a very clear idea. I'm getting involved in protecting my family. And Robert, I'm very good at protecting what's mine. As Diana spoke, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years: safety. Her mother had walked into this nightmare and immediately seen it for what it was. More importantly, she had the experience and resources to fight back. Robert must have sensed the shift in power dynamics, because his next words carried an unmistakable threat. Diana, I think you should be very careful about the accusations you make. I have significant resources, and I don't appreciate being threatened in my own home. Good, Diana replied. Then you understand how Sarah has been feeling for the past several years. Now you get to experience what it's like to be threatened by someone with more power than you have. Sarah watched her husband and her mother face off, and she realized that for the first time in her marriage, Robert had met someone who wasn't afraid of him. The war for Sarah's freedom was about to begin. Diana spent her first night in the penthouse in the guest bedroom, but she was awake most of the time, making phone calls and taking notes. By morning, she had assembled what she privately referred to as her war council, a private investigator, a divorce attorney, and a forensic accountant who specialized in complex asset searches. Over breakfast, while Robert was in his office on conference calls with investors, Diana explained her strategy to Sarah. The key to defeating a narcissist is the same as defeating any bully: you have to be better prepared, better connected, and more ruthless than they are. Diana spread her notes across the kitchen island. Robert thinks he's been playing chess while you've been playing checkers. He doesn't realize that I've been playing three-dimensional chess for 25 years. Sarah picked at her eggs, her appetite diminished by stress and pregnancy. Mom, what if he's right? What if I can't make it on my own? Sarah, look at me. Diana waited until her daughter made eye contact. You are not on your own. You have me. You have resources he doesn't know about, and you have something he'll never have. What's that? People who actually care about you. Robert has allies, but he doesn't have friends. When this gets ugly, and it will get ugly, his support will evaporate because it's all transactional. Your support comes from love, and that's much more powerful. Diana's phone rang, and she answered immediately. Marcus, what did you find? Sarah listened to her mother's side of a conversation with what was obviously the private investigator. Multiple offshore accounts. How many? Diana was taking rapid notes. And the previous relationships I see? Yes. Get me documentation on all of it. When Diana hung up, her expression was grim. What did he find? Sarah asked. Robert has been very busy hiding money. Marcus found evidence of at least 5 offshore accounts with a combined value of over $8 million. Money that should be considered marital assets. Sarah felt dizzy. $8 million. How is that possible? Because Robert has been systematically moving money out of your reach for years, probably in preparation for exactly this scenario. But that's illegal, isn't it? It's certainly unethical. Whether it's illegal depends on how he did it and what documentation we can find. But Sarah, there's something else. Diana's voice was gentle but serious. Marcus found evidence that Robert has done this before. At least twice. Previous relationships that ended with the women financially destroyed, while Robert moved on to younger replacements. Sarah set down her fork, her hands trembling. He's done this to other women. A pattern of behavior. Long-term relationships where he isolated the women, made them financially dependent, then discarded them when he found replacements. In both cases, the women ended up with nothing. What happened to them? One moved back in with her elderly parents. The other had to declare bankruptcy. Both signed non-disclosure agreements in exchange for minimal settlements. Sarah felt sick. I could have been just another woman he destroyed. You still could be if we don't handle this correctly. But Sarah, you have something those women didn't have. What? Me? And evidence. And timing. Diana's phone rang again. This time it was her attorney. Jennifer, tell me you have good news. Yes, I understand the challenges. But what are our options? Diana listened for several minutes, occasionally asking sharp questions about property law and asset recovery. What about emergency protective orders, not for physical abuse, but for financial abuse? I see. And if we can document the systematic isolation, excellent. When she hung up, Diana looked more optimistic. Jennifer thinks we have a strong case for financial abuse, especially if we can document the pattern of isolation and the hidden assets. But we need to move quickly. Why quickly? Because Robert is smart, and he's going to realize soon that you're not going to quietly accept his plan. When he does, he'll accelerate his timeline. As if summoned by their conversation, Robert appeared in the kitchen. He was dressed for work in one of his expensive suits, but Sarah noticed that he looked tired and stressed. "Diana, I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you. I had some lovely conversations with old friends." Robert's expression sharpened. "What kind of friends?" "The kind who are very good at finding information. I hope you don't mind that I've been catching up with people." "What kind of information?" Diana smiled pleasantly. "Oh, just general information about business practices, asset management, that sort of thing. You'd be surprised how much people are willing to share when they think someone might be in trouble." Robert poured himself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. "Diana, I think you might be getting carried away with whatever story Sarah has told you. Actually, I haven't been relying on Sarah's story at all. I've been doing my own research. Research into what? Into you, Robert, your business practices, your personal history, your financial arrangements. It's amazing what public records can tell you about someone if you know where to look." Robert set down his coffee cup hard enough to splash coffee onto the counter. "I don't appreciate being investigated in my own home." "I'm sure you don't. Just like I'm sure you didn't appreciate being publicly exposed at your business dinner last night. But sometimes people's actions have consequences they weren't expecting." Sarah watched the exchange with fascination. Her mother was completely calm, almost cheerful, while Robert was clearly agitated and off balance. "Diana, I'm going to ask you to stop whatever investigation you think you're conducting. And I'm going to decline, but I appreciate the request." Robert's phone buzzed, and he answered it immediately. "Williams, what? When did this happen?" "I see." He hung up and looked directly at Diana. "One of my investors just called. Someone has been asking questions about my business practices and personal conduct. How interesting. I wonder who would do such a thing." "Diana, this needs to stop. Now." "Actually, Robert, this is just getting started. I made some calls last night to people who are very good at their jobs. By the end of the week, we'll have a complete picture of your financial situation, your business practices, and your personal history. You can't just, I can, and I am. You've spent years systematically destroying my daughter's life. Now it's your turn to experience what it feels like when someone with resources decides to focus their attention on you." Robert's face was flushed with anger. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Actually, I have a very clear idea. I'm dealing with a man who thinks his money and position make him untouchable. I'm here to prove how wrong he is." Sarah had never seen her husband look genuinely frightened before, but she saw it now. "Robert," Diana continued, "I want you to understand something. I've spent 25 years building relationships with powerful people. Lawyers, accountants, investigators, journalists, business leaders, people who don't like bullies and who especially don't like men who prey on women. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. You can either work with us to arrange a fair and reasonable separation, or you can fight us and discover exactly how much damage a network of motivated professionals can do to someone who's been careless about covering his tracks." Robert looked between Diana and Sarah could see him calculating odds and options. "I'm not going to be blackmailed." "This isn't blackmail. Robert, this is accountability. There's a difference." After Robert left for work, Diana turned to Sarah with a satisfied expression. "How do you feel?" "Scared. But also, hopeful. Is that weird?" "It's not weird at all. For the first time in years, you're not facing this alone." And Sarah, "Yes, we're going to win." Robert has been playing a game he thought only he knew the rules to. He's about to discover that there are other players in this game, and we know some rules he's never heard of. Diana's phone rang again, and she answered with a smile. "Marcus, tell me you have more good news." The investigation was just beginning, but Sarah could already feel the balance of power shifting. Robert Williams was about to learn that underestimating Diana Mitchell was the biggest mistake of his carefully calculated life. That evening, an unexpected phone call changed everything. Sarah was helping her mother review financial documents when Diana's phone rang with an unknown number. Diana Mitchell. Miss Mitchell, this is Jessica Parker. I think we need to talk. Diana's eyebrows rose and she put the call on speaker so Sarah could hear. Jessica, how did you get my number? I have my ways. Listen, I've been thinking about what Sarah said yesterday, and I think I may have made some assumptions about Robert that were incorrect. Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. The sultry confidence she'd heard in Jessica's voice during their previous conversation had been replaced by something more uncertain. What kind of assumptions, Diana asked. That I was special. That he really loved me. That he was going to leave Sarah for me because I was different from his other relationships. And now you're questioning those assumptions. I did some research of my own, about Robert's history, about his previous relationships. Sarah was right. I'm not the first mistress he's promised a future to. Diana and Sarah exchanged glances. This was an unexpected development. What exactly did you discover? Diana asked. That there were at least 2 women before Sarah. Long-term relationships that ended badly when he found younger replacements. And there was a woman between Sarah and me, someone named Amanda, who lasted about 8 months before he discarded her for me. Sarah felt her stomach clench. She'd never known about Amanda. Jessica, Diana said carefully, why are you telling us this? Because I think Robert has been playing all of us? And because I'm 7 months pregnant with no backup plan and a growing suspicion that I'm about to become his next discarded woman? What makes you think that he's been distancing himself from me lately? Canceled dates, shorter phone calls, excuses about why he can't spend time with me. And yesterday, when Sarah confronted me, something clicked. The way he talked about Sarah in the beginning was exactly how he talks about me now, like I'm temporary. Diana was taking notes rapidly. Jessica, would you be willing to meet with us in person? I think that might be a good idea, but not at the penthouse. Somewhere neutral. An hour later, Diana, Sarah, and Jessica sat at a corner table in an upscale coffee shop, an unlikely alliance forming over shared betrayal. Jessica Parker was everything Sarah wasn't: young, blonde, and polished in a way that spoke of professional grooming and expensive maintenance. But her confidence was cracking, and Sarah could see fear beneath the carefully constructed exterior. He told me you were boring, Jessica said directly to Sarah. Said you'd let yourself go, that you weren't interesting anymore. Said the marriage had been dead for years. What did he tell you about your future together? Sarah asked. That we'd live in the penthouse after you moved out? That he'd divorce you quietly and we'd get married after the baby was born? That I'd have everything I wanted: financial security, social status, a powerful husband. Diana set down her coffee cup. And in exchange, I gave up my job, my apartment, my independence. He said he wanted to take care of me during the pregnancy, that I shouldn't stress myself with work. Sarah recognized the pattern immediately. He isolated you. Completely. I lost touch with most of my friends because I was always busy with Robert. I let my professional relationships lapse because he said I wouldn't need to work anymore. Jessica, Diana said gently, what changed your mind about Robert? Jessica's perfectly manicured hands twisted together. 2 things. First, Sarah's phone call made me realize that everything Robert had told me about their marriage was probably a lie. If he lied about Sarah, what else was he lying about? And the second thing, I overheard a conversation he had with someone, I think it was his lawyer. He was talking about managing 2 situations and minimizing financial exposure. When I asked him about it, he said it was just business. But the way he looked at me, Jessica shuddered. I realized I was one of the situations being managed. Sarah felt an unexpected sympathy for this woman who had unknowingly become part of Robert's manipulation scheme. Jessica, what do you want from this conversation? Diana asked. I want to know what Robert is really planning. And I want to know if there's a way to protect myself and my baby from becoming his next victims. Diana smiled, and Sarah recognized the expression. It was the same look her mother got when she'd found the perfect fabric for a challenging design. I think we can help each other. Robert's strength comes from divide and conquer tactics. He keeps his victims isolated and competing with each other instead of comparing notes. But if we work together, Sarah asked, if we work together, we have information he doesn't know we have and resources he can't control. Three women with different types of evidence against a man who thinks he's been playing us against each other. Jessica leaned forward. What kind of evidence do you have? Diana pulled out her notes. Financial records showing hidden assets, documentation of his pattern of behavior with previous relationships, evidence of systematic emotional and financial abuse. What kind of evidence do you have? Sarah asked Jessica. Recordings. I've been recording our conversations for the past month because I was starting to doubt my own memory of things he'd said. And I have emails and text messages where he makes promises about our future together. Diana's eyes lit up. Recordings of what? Him talking about his plans for after Sarah accepts the situation? Him discussing how to minimize his financial obligations to both of us? Him talking about Sarah like she's a problem to be managed rather than a person with rights? Sarah felt a mixture of hurt and vindication. The recordings would prove that her marriage had become a calculated business arrangement rather than a relationship. Here's what I propose, Diana said. We combine our resources and our evidence. We work together to expose Robert's systematic abuse and fraud, and we make sure that all three of us come out of this with dignity and financial security. What about the babies? Jessica asked. I don't want my child to grow up with Robert as a father, but I also can't afford to raise a child alone. That's exactly why we need to work together, Sarah said. He's counting on us being too scared and isolated to fight back. But if we're united, we have leverage, Diana finished. Jessica, are you willing to share your recordings with our attorney? Jessica nodded slowly. If it means protecting my baby from growing up in Robert's twisted world, yes. Then here's the plan, Diana said, pulling out a fresh notepad. We document everything. We coordinate our stories. We prepare for Robert to escalate his manipulation when he realizes he's losing control. And then we take him down publicly and legally. What if he tries to retaliate? Sarah asked. He will try to retaliate. That's what narcissists do when they lose control. But Sarah, you have something now that you didn't have before? What's that? Allies and evidence? And a mother who's been waiting 20 years for someone to give her a good reason to destroy them. As they planned their strategy, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope, not just for her own freedom, but for Jessica and her unborn child, and for any other women who might find themselves in Robert's crosshairs. Robert Williams thought he was playing a game where he controlled all the pieces. He was about to discover that the game had changed, and his opponents had been playing by different rules all along. The alliance between the three women was formed that night over coffee and shared determination. By the time they left the coffee shop, they had a plan that would either free them all or destroy them in the attempt. Either way, they would face it together. Diana spent the next 3 days orchestrating what she privately called Operation Accountability. The plan was complex, requiring precise timing and coordination between multiple parties. But Diana had spent 25 years managing complicated business operations. Destroying one narcissistic millionaire ex-husband was well within her skill set. The centerpiece of their strategy was Robert's company's annual gala, scheduled for Friday night. It was the social event of the year for the tech industry in their city, with over 300 attendees including investors, media representatives, and business leaders. Robert was scheduled to give the keynote address about innovation and integrity in modern business. Diana found the irony delicious. The key, Diana explained to Sarah and Jessica during their Wednesday strategy meeting, is that narcissists can't resist an audience. Robert will be at his most confident and arrogant on Friday night, surrounded by people he wants to impress. That's when people make mistakes. Jessica had become an invaluable asset to their cause. Her recordings of Robert's conversations provided evidence of his systematic manipulation that went far beyond simple infidelity. In one particularly damaging recording, Robert discussed Sarah as a temporary inconvenience that would be resolved after the birth. I still can't believe I was recording my own manipulation, Jessica said, shaking her head. But I'm glad I was. Some of the things he said were designed to make you doubt your own judgment and perception of reality, Diana finished. It's called gaslighting, And it's a classic narcissistic abuse tactic. Sarah was reading through the financial documents that Diana's forensic accountant had compiled. Mom, some of these transfers happened years ago. He's been planning this for a long time, which works in our favor. The longer the pattern of deception, the more serious the legal and financial consequences. Diana's phone rang, and she answered immediately. Marcus, what do you have for me? The private investigator's report was comprehensive and damaging. Robert had been systematically moving marital assets into offshore accounts for over 3 years. He had also been using company resources to support Jessica, which constituted both fraud and breach of fiduciary duty to his investors. And the previous relationships, Diana asked, all followed the same pattern: isolation, financial control, emotional manipulation, then discard and replacement. I found evidence of at least 6 women over the past 15 years who fit the profile. Diana was taking rapid notes. 6 women, all with similar stories of financial devastation after relationships with Robert ended. There's more. Robert's company is under SEC investigation for irregularities in their financial reporting. The investigation is confidential, but my contacts suggest it's serious. Diana smiled grimly. How serious? Serious enough that public revelation of additional financial improprieties could trigger criminal charges? When Diana hung up, she turned to Sarah and Jessica with satisfaction. Ladies, Robert Williams is about to have a very bad week. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected complication. Sarah began experiencing contractions and had to be taken to the hospital for observation. The stress of the situation was affecting her pregnancy, and her doctor insisted on bed rest. Mom, we have to postpone everything, Sarah said from her hospital bed. I can't risk the baby. Sweetheart, we're not postponing anything. Jessica and I can handle Friday night. You focus on taking care of yourself and your child. But what if something goes wrong? What if Robert realizes what we're doing? Then we'll adapt. Sarah, one thing I've learned in business is that you can't control every variable, but you can prepare for contingencies. Diana squeezed her daughter's hand. And our biggest contingency is that Robert thinks he's still in control. He has no idea what's coming tomorrow night. That evening, Diana and Jessica made their final preparations. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would attend the gala as invited guests, wait for Robert's keynote speech, and then systematically expose his systematic abuse using evidence that was undeniable and public embarrassment that was unavoidable. Are you sure you're ready for this? Diana asked Jessica as they reviewed their timeline. I'm 7 months pregnant, financially dependent on a man who's planning to discard me, and carrying the child of someone who sees me as a temporary convenience. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Friday evening arrived with the kind of clarity that comes with decisive action. Diana dressed in one of her own designs, a midnight blue dress that conveyed authority and sophistication. Jessica wore elegant maternity wear that emphasized her pregnancy and her vulnerability. The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, with crystal chandeliers and marble floors that reflected the light from hundreds of candles. Robert was in his element, working the room with practiced charm and political skill. Diana and Jessica arrived separately and maintained distance from each other throughout the evening. To any observer, they appeared to be just 2 more guests at a successful business event. Robert's keynote speech was scheduled for 9 o'clock. At 8:45, Diana positioned herself near the stage while Jessica found a seat in the front row where she would be clearly visible to both Robert and the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, the master of ceremonies announced, please welcome Robert Williams, CEO of Williams Tech Solutions, speaking tonight on innovation and integrity in modern business. Robert took the stage to enthusiastic applause, looking confident and successful in his custom-tailored tuxedo. He began his speech with jokes and industry insights, warming up the audience for his main points about ethical business practices and corporate responsibility. Diana waited until Robert was 15 minutes into his speech, until he was relaxed and confident, until the audience was fully engaged with his presentation. Then she stood up and began walking toward the stage. Excuse me, Diana said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. I have something to add to this discussion about integrity. Robert's speech faltered as he saw Diana approaching the microphone. The audience turned to look at this silver-haired woman who was interrupting the keynote address. I'm sorry, ma'am, Robert said, trying to maintain his composure. But this is a scheduled presentation, and I'm scheduling an unscheduled edition, Diana replied, reaching the stage and taking the microphone with the confidence of someone who had spent decades commanding attention. Ladies and gentlemen, Diana announced to the now silent ballroom, I'd like to introduce you to the real Robert Williams. Robert tried to reclaim the microphone, but Diana stepped smoothly away from him. My name is Diana Mitchell, and I'm here tonight to discuss a different kind of innovation, the innovation that Robert Williams has brought to the art of systematic abuse and financial fraud. The audience was completely silent now. 300 people frozen in fascination and horror as Diana continued. Mr. Williams likes to talk about integrity, but I'd like to share some information about his actual business practices, starting with the $8 million in marital assets that he's hidden in offshore accounts to prevent his pregnant wife from accessing her legal share of their community property. Robert's face had gone white. Security, he called out, but the security guards seemed as frozen as everyone else. I'd also like to introduce you to Jessica Parker, Diana continued, gesturing toward the front row where Jessica stood up, her pregnancy clearly visible. Ms. Parker is 7 months pregnant with Mr. Williams' child. She's also one of at least 6 women who have been systematically isolated, financially controlled, and then discarded by Robert Williams over the past 15 years. The audience was murmuring now, phones coming out to record the unprecedented scene. But most importantly, Diana said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system, I'd like you to meet my daughter Sarah, who is currently in the hospital due to pregnancy complications caused by the stress of discovering that her husband of 20 years has been planning to replace her with a younger woman while forcing her to serve as unpaid domestic help for his mistress. Robert made one final attempt to regain control. This woman is clearly having some kind of breakdown. Actually, Diana interrupted, the only breakdown happening here is the breakdown of your carefully constructed lies. She pulled out a tablet and connected it to the presentation system. I have recordings, financial documents, and sworn statements from multiple women detailing Robert Williams' pattern of systematic abuse. I have evidence of fraud, asset concealment, and breach of fiduciary duty. The room erupted in noise as Diana's evidence appeared on the large screens throughout the ballroom. Financial transfer records, recorded conversations, and detailed timelines of Robert's manipulation tactics were displayed for everyone to see. And finally, Diana announced over the growing chaos, I have a message from my daughter Sarah, who wanted to be here tonight but is currently in the hospital because of the stress this man has put her through. Diana's voice softened slightly as she delivered Sarah's words. For 20 years, I believed that love meant accepting less than I deserved. Tonight, I want every woman in this room to understand that love should never require you to disappear. Thank you for listening. The ballroom exploded into chaos as Robert fled the stage and investors began frantically making phone calls. Diana calmly gathered her materials and walked toward the exit, where Jessica was waiting for her. How do you feel? Jessica asked as they left the hotel. Like justice, Diana replied. I feel like justice. Behind them, Robert Williams' carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time, documented by hundreds of phones and witnessed by the very business community he had spent years trying to impress. The trap had been sprung perfectly, and there would be no escape. The fallout from Friday night's gala was swift and devastating. By Saturday morning, Robert Williams was the subject of trending social media posts, news articles, and an emergency SEC investigation that had been accelerated by the public exposure of his financial irregularities. Diana sat in Sarah's hospital room, scrolling through news coverage on her tablet while Sarah held her newborn daughter. The baby had arrived Saturday morning, 2 weeks early but healthy, as if she'd been waiting for her mother's liberation before making her entrance into the world. Listen to this headline, Diana said. Tech CEO exposed for systematic abuse pattern. SEC investigates hidden assets. Ere this one, pregnant wife forced to serve husband's mistress business community responds. Sarah adjusted the baby in her arms, marveling at how peaceful her daughter looked despite the chaos surrounding her birth. What about Robert? Have you heard from him? His lawyer called this morning. Apparently, Robert wants to arrange a private meeting to discuss resolution of this unfortunate misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what we're calling 20 years of systematic abuse? Jessica appeared in the doorway, carrying flowers and looking exhausted but determined. How are you feeling? And how's the baby? We're both good. Better than good, actually. I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. Jessica sat down carefully, her own pregnancy making movement awkward. I came to tell you that Robert called me this morning too. He offered me a substantial settlement in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement and disappearing. How substantial? Diana asked. $2 million and a house in another state, plus support for the baby until she's 18? Sarah studied Jessica's expression. But you're not taking it. I'm not taking it. $2 million is a lot of money, but it's not worth letting him do this to other women. Besides, your mother's attorney thinks we can get much more than that through legal channels. Diana smiled approvingly. Jessica's right. Robert's offering settlements because he knows what we can prove in court. The fact that he's offering money means he's scared. How scared? Sarah asked. Scared enough to make mistakes. His lawyer let slip that the SEC investigation has uncovered additional irregularities that go beyond what we exposed. Robert's been using company funds for personal expenses for years, including his arrangements with Jessica and previous mistresses. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction. So his systematic abuse of women was also systematic fraud of his business partners. Exactly, which means this is no longer just a divorce case. This is potentially criminal prosecution for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Jessica's phone buzzed, and she answered immediately. Hello. What? Are you sure? I'll be right there. She hung up with a strange expression. That was my lawyer. Apparently Robert's been arrested. Arrested, Diana and Sarah said simultaneously. Financial fraud and embezzlement charges. The FBI executed search warrants on his office and the penthouse this morning. Sarah stared at her daughter, this innocent child who would never know her father as anything other than a cautionary tale. It's really over, isn't it? The criminal case is just beginning, Diana said. But yes, sweetheart, your marriage to Robert Williams is definitely over. Over the next several hours, they watched Robert's empire collapse in real time. His business partners issued statements distancing themselves from his actions. His investors called emergency meetings to discuss damage control. His board of directors met an emergency session to discuss his removal as CEO. By Sunday evening, Robert Williams had been fired from his own company, charged with multiple felonies, and was facing the complete destruction of everything he'd built through decades of manipulation and abuse. I keep thinking I should feel sorry for him, Sarah said as she watched the news coverage. 20 years of marriage doesn't just disappear because he turned out to be a monster. You're allowed to grieve the man you thought you married, Diana replied. That's different from feeling sorry for the man he actually was. Jessica nodded. I've been thinking about that too. I fell in love with a person who never really existed. Robert Williams, the loving partner, was just a performance designed to get what he wanted. But here's what's important, Diana said, moving to sit beside Sarah's hospital bed. You both survived. You both protected your children, and you both found the strength to fight back when it mattered most. Sarah looked down at her daughter, this tiny person who represented hope and new beginnings. What kind of world are we bringing them into? A world where women support each other, Jessica said firmly. A world where their mothers were brave enough to fight back against someone who tried to destroy them. Diana's phone rang, interrupting the moment. She answered with her usual brisk efficiency. Diana Mitchell. Yes, I've been following the news. How much? All of it. Excellent. When she hung up, Diana was smiling broadly. That was Jennifer, our attorney. The court has frozen all of Robert's assets pending the criminal investigation. More importantly, they've identified the offshore accounts and are beginning the process of asset recovery. What does that mean for us? Sarah asked. It means you're going to be financially secure. Sweetheart, very secure. The hidden assets, plus the value of the penthouse and other properties, plus damages for the systematic financial abuse. We're looking at a settlement that will ensure you never have to depend on anyone else for financial security again. Sarah felt tears of relief rolling down her cheeks. I can't believe it's really happening. Believe it, Jessica said. We did this together. 3 women who refused to let one man's cruelty define our futures. Speaking of futures, Diana said, I have a proposition for both of you. Sarah and Jessica looked at her expectantly. I've been thinking about expanding my fashion business. starting a new line focused on empowering women who are rebuilding their lives. Clothes that make women feel strong and confident and beautiful, regardless of their circumstances. That sounds amazing, Sarah said. But what does that have to do with us? I want you both to be part of it. Sarah, you have a business degree and experience running operations. Jessica, you have marketing and public relations experience. Together, we could build something meaningful. Jessica leaned forward, interested. What would you call this new line? Diana smiled. Survivor chic. Fashion for women who've been through hell and came out stronger. Sarah looked at her mother, this woman who had traveled across the country to save her daughter and ended up changing all their lives. You really think we could do this? I think we've already proven we can do anything when we work together. Building a business will be easy compared to taking down Robert Williams. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media interviews, and planning sessions for their new venture. Robert was denied bail due to flight risk concerns and remained in federal custody while prosecutors built their case. Sarah moved into a new apartment with her daughter, a space that belonged entirely to her. Jessica found a place nearby, and the two women who had once been positioned as rivals discovered they had more in common than their shared experience with Robert's manipulation. Diana split her time between managing her existing business and developing their new collaboration. The initial designs for Survivor Chic were bold, confident pieces that told stories of resilience and strength. The key, Diana explained as they reviewed preliminary sketches, is that these clothes should make women feel powerful. Not just beautiful, but genuinely powerful. Sarah was learning to balance new motherhood with business planning, discovering strengths she'd forgotten she possessed. I love that we're creating something positive out of something so destructive. That's what survivors do, Jessica added. We take our experiences and use them to help other people avoid the same traps. 6 weeks after the gala, Robert's criminal trial began. The prosecution's case was overwhelming, built on the evidence Diana had helped compile, plus additional financial crimes uncovered by federal investigators. Sarah testified about the systematic emotional and financial abuse, her voice strong and clear as she described 20 years of increasing control and manipulation. Jessica testified about Robert's promises and lies, playing recordings that documented his calculated deception. Diana testified about her investigation and the pattern of abuse she'd uncovered, presenting evidence of multiple women who had been destroyed by Robert's systematic predation. The defense attempted to portray Robert as a successful businessman who had made some personal mistakes, but the evidence was too comprehensive and the pattern too clear. Robert Williams was convicted on 12 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to his victims, a sum that totaled over $20 million. 6 months later, spring sunlight streamed through the windows of Sarah's new home, a comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood where her daughter could grow up safely. The sound of baby laughter mixed with the gentle hum of Diana's sewing machine, which had been set up in the converted garage that now served as their design studio. Sarah bounced her 6-month-old daughter Emma on her lap while reviewing orders for Survivor Chic's first major retail partnership. The business had grown faster than any of them had anticipated, driven by word-of-mouth marketing from women who understood the mission behind the clothes. The department store wants to feature us in their fall campaign, Sarah announced to Diana and Jessica, who were working on new designs. They want to call it Fashion for Fearless Women. I love it, Jessica said, looking up from her laptop where she was managing their social media presence. Her own daughter had been born 2 months earlier, and both babies often shared the workspace with their mothers. Our Instagram engagement is up 300% this month. Diana smiled as she adjusted a seam on a blazer that was part of their professional wear collection. You know what I love most about this business? What's that? Sarah asked. We're not just making clothes. We're making statements. Every woman who wears our designs is telling the world that she refuses to be diminished. The transformation in all 3 women was remarkable. Sarah had regained the confidence and business acumen that Robert had systematically undermined. Her divorce settlement had provided financial security, but more importantly, she had rediscovered her own capabilities. Jessica had revealed herself to be a gifted marketer with an intuitive understanding of social media and brand development. Her experience with Robert had taught her to recognize manipulation tactics, skills that translated surprisingly well to understanding consumer psychology and authentic brand messaging. Diana had found new purpose in mentoring younger women while expanding her business empire. Survivor Chic had become more than a clothing line. It was a movement that celebrated women's resilience and strength. I got a call from a reporter this morning, Jessica announced. She wants to do a follow-up story about Robert's sentencing and how we've rebuilt our lives. Are you interested in doing the interview? Sarah asked. I think so. I want other women to know that escaping an abusive situation isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a better one. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and laughed. What's funny? Diana asked. It's from Lisa Chen, my college friend. She says she's getting divorced and wants to know if we have any clothes that make women feel ready to conquer the world. Tell her we specialize in exactly that, Diana replied. As the afternoon wore on, they worked in comfortable companionship. The sound of babies cooing and machines humming, creating a soundtrack of productivity and peace. It was a far cry from the tension and fear that had characterized Sarah's life just 8 months earlier. Can I ask you both something? Sarah said during a break in their work. Always, Diana replied. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't worked together? If we had let Robert pit us against each other the way he planned? Jessica considered the question seriously. I think we all would have ended up destroyed. I would have discovered eventually that he was planning to discard me too. But by then I would have been completely isolated and financially dependent, just like his previous victims. And I would have ended up raising Emma alone with no resources and no support system, Sarah added. Robert would have gotten away with everything, and there would have been more women after Jessica. Diana nodded. The thing about predators like Robert is that they rely on shame and isolation to keep their victims silent. When women start talking to each other, comparing experiences, the predator's power disappears. Is that why you wanted to expose him so publicly? Jessica asked. Partly, but also because I wanted other women to see that fighting back is possible, that abusers aren't as powerful as they pretend to be when their victims have support and resources. Sarah looked around their workspace, at the evidence of their collaboration and success, at her daughter playing peacefully in her carrier, at her mother and Jessica working together on designs that would help other women feel strong. I keep thinking about something Emma's pediatrician said, Sarah shared. She told me that babies can sense stress and tension, but they can also sense safety and love. Emma is going to grow up knowing that women support each other, that we don't have to accept less than we deserve. And my daughter will grow up with the same understanding, Jessica added. She'll never doubt her worth the way I did. Diana paused in her sewing to look at both younger women. You know what I'm most proud of? What one that we didn't just survive Robert Williams. We transformed the experience into something that helps other women. We turned our trauma into triumph. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find a delivery person with a large package. What is it? Jessica asked as Sarah signed for the delivery. Sarah opened the package and pulled out the first production samples of their latest collection, a line of professional wear designed specifically for women re-entering the workforce after divorce or other major life changes. They're perfect, Diana said, examining the quality of the construction and the fit of the garments. Look at this, Jessica said, reading the note that had come with the samples. The manufacturer wants to feature our story in their company newsletter. They're calling us an inspiration to other women entrepreneurs. Sarah held up one of the blazers, a deep navy piece with subtle details that conveyed both professionalism and strength. Remember when Robert told me that no one would hire a 50-something woman with no recent experience? I remember, Diana said grimly. Well, I may not have gotten hired by someone else, but I hired myself, and Jessica, and soon we'll be hiring other women who need a chance to prove what they can do. That evening, after Jessica had gone home and Diana was putting the finishing touches on a new design, Sarah sat in her living room with Emma, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. 8 months ago, she had been washing another woman's clothes and accepting the slow destruction of her spirit. Tonight, she was a successful entrepreneur, a single mother by choice, and part of a business that was helping other women reclaim their power. Her phone rang, and she saw Lisa Chen's name on the screen. Sarah, I saw the article about Survivor Chic in the Business Journal. I'm so proud of you. Thank you. It feels surreal sometimes. How much has changed? Can I ask you something? How did you find the courage to fight back? I'm going through my own divorce, and some days I feel so overwhelmed. Sarah looked down at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms, and thought about her mother's unwavering support in Jessica's unexpected alliance. I learned that asking for help isn't weakness. It's the first step towards strength. And sometimes the people who love you most are the ones brave enough to fight your battles when you can't. That's beautiful and true. Lisa, you're going to be okay. More than okay. You're going to discover strengths you didn't know you had. After they hung up, Sarah carried Emma to the nursery and settled her in the crib surrounded by soft colors and natural light. The room was peaceful and safe, filled with the promise of a future built on love rather than control. Back in the living room, Sarah picked up her laptop and began working on their business plan for the next quarter. Survivor Chic was expanding into online retail, and they were planning a series of workshops for women rebuilding their lives after abusive relationships. As she worked, Sarah could hear the gentle sounds of her new life, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of neighbors talking in their gardens, the peaceful breathing of her sleeping daughter. These were the sounds of freedom, of choices made from strength rather than fear. The washing machine in her laundry room hummed quietly as it cleaned clothes that belonged only to her and Emma. Sarah smiled at the memory of that first day when Robert had demanded she wash Jessica's clothes. That moment had been the beginning of her awakening, the first crack in the facade that had hidden years of systematic abuse. Now the washing machine cleaned clothes for a woman who owned her own home, ran her own business, and made her own choices. The sound that had once symbolized her humiliation had become a reminder of how far she'd traveled. Sarah closed her laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street where Emma would learn to ride a bicycle and make friends and grow up surrounded by the knowledge that she was valued and loved unconditionally. In the distance, city lights twinkled like stars, and Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. She had lost a marriage, but she had gained herself. She had lost financial security temporarily, but she had gained the knowledge that she could create her own security. She had lost the illusion of love, but she had found real love in the support of women who refused to let each other fall. The story that had begun with humiliation and manipulation had transformed into one of resilience and triumph. Sarah Williams was no longer the woman who had accepted less than she deserved. She was the woman who had fought back, who had rebuilt, and who was now helping other women do the same. As she prepared for bed, Sarah thought about the note she wanted to include in the next Survivor Chic newsletter. To every woman who has ever felt small, invisible, or powerless, your story is not over. Your strength is not gone. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with the courage to say no more and the wisdom to say, help me. Sarah turned off the lights and headed to her bedroom, content in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to help other women find their strength. The nightmare was over, and the real life, the life she had chosen and built with her own hands, was just beginning. In the nursery, Emma slept peacefully, unaware that she was growing up in a world her mother had fought to make safer and more just. She would grow up knowing that women support each other, that love should never require you to disappear, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to accept less than you deserve. The washing machine finished its cycle and fell silent, leaving only the gentle sounds of a home filled with peace, possibility, and the quiet strength of women who had learned to save themselves.